Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another Big Data London webinar. Today, we're looking at the value of the Analytics Catalogue. I'm Andy Steed, Content Director of Big Data London, and I'm pleased today to be joined by Mike Ferguson from Intelligent Business Strategies. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Andy. Good to see you.
And, yeah, nice to see you again. And Saurbh, Khera from ZenOptics. Hi, Saurbh.
Good to meet you, Andy.
Thank you, and a big thank you to Saurbh because it's very early where he is. He's coming direct from California, so let's show him a good welcome to Big Data London webinars. So like always, these sessions are designed to be interactive. So please use the question function to send in any questions you have during the presentation, and I'll endeavour to ask as many as I possibly can at the end. Quick note of housekeeping: if you lose the stream at any point, you shouldn't, but just in case, just hit refresh on the browser and you should just jump straight back in. However, without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to our first speaker today. So over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Andy. So hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to this session on value of analytics catalogs. If you just bear with me while I share my screen. Get to the right. Here we go. Okay. Whoops. There we go. So, yeah. So what I would like to talk to you today is obviously about analytics catalogs and why do we need these as part of our data-driven enterprise, and why are they important? So, in order to do that, I'd like to first of all just take a step back and say, where are we in data analytics today? You know, what's been happening, and what kind of challenges, if you like, have all the activities that have been going on in the world of data and analytics. You know, what challenges have they brought up, and then what are the kind of key requirements if we're really going to maximize the value of all of the analytical assets that people are producing around the enterprise. And by that I mean things like BI reports, I mean dashboards, stories. You know, storytelling is a big deal nowadays in BI. You know, having these data stories, if you like, and then also other analytical assets produced by data science and whatnot. You know, what's the requirement to really maximize the value of all of that we're building and developing? And then why is it that an analytics catalog is key to being able to leverage all of this? And what kinds of assets, if you like, would you see, or you know, what's the trend there? I'm talking from me as an industry analyst. What's the trend here in terms of what kinds of analytical assets potentially are available to you in an analytics catalog? And then how do you use an analytics catalog to, if you like, put everything to work in the enterprise in order to be able to realize the benefit of all of those insights and predictions and recommendations and whatnot that we can get from the assets that we're developing? And then how would you then, you know, use that in order to maximize the value across the enterprise business processes? So let's just get going. So probably for most of you out there, you're probably very familiar with this basic architecture about data warehousing, where you pull your data from a variety of transaction systems that are known, things like your financial ERP system, your customer relationship management system, and any procurement supply chain management kind of environments, where you bring that data in, clean it, integrate into data warehouses. And from there, we use BI tools in order to produce a range of different reports and dashboards and stories, you know, that can be shared across different devices. And for most of my clients, you know, over the years, they've ended up building multiple data warehouses, typically because, you know, waiting for a monolithic one to be built often hasn't happened in several of my clients. And so over time, they may have built up multiple different data warehouses, different parts of the business. For example, in a front office supporting marketing and sales, or in some part of your business operations. Maybe if you're a manufacturer, that could be to do with inventory management and distribution, for example. And if you're in the back office, it's probably to do with things like, you know, finance and procurement and all of that. So highly likely, though, that those have been built at different points in time, maybe with different teams, often with different technologies, and quite normal to see a range of different BI tools being used to access the data marts hanging off of those data warehouses, or even the data warehouses themselves. So I think over time, it's pretty normal, certainly is in my clients, to have ended up with a range of different BI tools that are in use around the business. And of course, you know, some parts, you know, of the business more heavily into things like Excel than others, typically finance, procurement, big Excel users. But nevertheless, Excel is always in the mix within an enterprise across different parts of the business, as well as the traditional BI tools, a kind of list of which you kind of sort of see here. Certainly not an exhaustive list, but a reasonable list of the popular BI tools that are out there these days. And however, you know, it's gone way beyond data warehousing. We have now for a number of years been looking at all kinds of additional data, machine generated data, generated by people clicking on their mouses or their mouse pads or touching their mobile phone screens, all that clickstream data held in your web server log files. In addition to that, we've got IoT data streaming in from a broad range of devices, either consumer devices or industrial equipment that have embedded sensors and whatnot. We've had human-generated data, such as opinions being voiced on social network websites, or alternatively on your inbound email or your web chat or in call center transcripts of your CRM system. All of that, you know, data being documented, even voice data being recorded in contact centers, for example. And external data, either bought or increasingly got for free from a broad range of open data government websites. So we can go to various governments and find a broad range of free data sets that companies can download in order to add value to what they already know from that additional data. So with all of that data streaming into the enterprise, you know, what's the driver behind that? Well, one of the big reasons for that is to understand much more about customers, you know, which has definitely been exacerbated because of the pandemic as companies go online to survive. You know, being able to interact with customers in online digital channels is pretty critical. And so the more you know about them, get all kinds of new data that are perhaps outside the bounds of your data warehouse. And so that could include, online behavior from clickstream. It could include their opinions, as well as the transactional activity that you would see in a data warehouse, and a complete kind of timeline of maybe all their interactions. And, people want all of that brought together now as quickly as possible to be able to get a more personalized customer experience. And all of that demand for data has ended up that we're now running a range of different analytical workloads beyond the data warehouse, in various kinds of analytical data stores, such as on cloud storage with something like perhaps Spark, or maybe on Hadoop. That could be on premises more likely but it could also outrun in the cloud. Graph databases, streaming analytics, as well as, of course, the traditional data warehouse. And as I said already, all of that, all available on the cloud, but for probably most of us, we're dealing with some hybrid mix of some of it on premises and some of it in the cloud. And so if you look at the world of data science, then you see, well, they're also gone through pretty well the same kind of cycle, if you like, as you've seen in the BI world that we saw a moment ago around data warehousing. If anything, that's even been even more frenzied over the last sort of 8 or 9 years, with all kinds of new technologies emerging and still emerging, with new tooling, new libraries of algorithms, allowing us to be able to analyze more and more complex data. And so naturally, over time, we've seen, especially with budget being handed out to different business units around the enterprise with their own autonomy, they're going out and buying a broad range of these tools that have often changed relatively rapidly. And so again, we have a situation where it's quite normal to see multiple kinds of tools out there to build these kinds of machine learning models and whatnot that are being used in different parts of the enterprise. And those models increasingly now being deployed server side into things like data warehouses, into scalable Spark environments on the cloud or into Hadoop environments, or increasingly being pushed out to the edge as we push models out to the edge to analyze real-time streaming data coming off of IoT devices. So more and more of these models getting deployed out there. And as these new analytical workloads have emerged and new platforms have emerged, so the BI tools that we have been using around data warehousing have stretched to be able to connect to these other analytical data stores. And so even more reports and dashboards and stories now being created using data potentially outside of the data warehouse or even joined to data on your data warehouse, whether those are the kind of search-oriented BI tools such as ThoughtSpot or the more SQL generating BI tools such as Power BI and Click and Tableau and whatnot. And so given that that's happened, then what are the challenges with all of this? And the key requirements if we're going to maximize all of the stuff that's being built out there. Well, I mean, certainly if you look at what's happening, what we've realized is we've got a fractured approach here, that's going on towards development of all of these things. And there's various silos, if you like, of development going on. Business analysts in different departments using different tools, focused on more of their departmental needs rather than perhaps of a broader enterprise-wide need. Also building models, again more business unit focused rather than necessarily what about the broader picture. But it's also clear that if all of these different tools are being used, people using one tool are not necessarily aware of what's being developed in other tools. And so there's no easy way to know if something that they're trying to build may even have been created already in some other part of the business. Even in the same business unit, that's potentially possible. And also because you're unaware of a lot of these things that are out there, there's also a lack of integration of what's being developed into core business processes for businesses to use that and really make it work. So especially around, certainly from what I can see around a lot of what's gone on so far, it's kind of been the more tactical use, the middle management area that it's been using the analytical assets that are being created, whereas and the other area, the problem area, if you like, is that it's not integrated. In other words, what's going on and being produced at operations level is not lined up and associated with contributing to goals necessarily at a tactical level or all the way up to a strategic level. They're not necessarily organized around strategic business goals. They're more focused on specific parts of the business, and that's really about it. Whereas I think a lot of my clients now are really looking to really get much more value out of what's being developed, especially at the operations level and at the strategic level, so that there's much greater use of these insights being produced in order to drive more effective decision making at all levels in the enterprise, and also to get greater alignment on common objectives to be able to get greater contribution. And there's no question the thirst is there from the executives. I mean, if you look at this survey, was classifying CEOs into everything from, if you like, torchbearer CEOs into the kind of aspirational ones, kind of torchbearer being the trailblazers, if you like. But what you can see here, is this real appetite to invest in getting insights out of data, in analytical assets that are really going to help, things like reduce costs through greater automation, and give us much deeper insights to make much more effective decision making. So, I'm pretty clear that the thirst and the strategic importance of analytical assets is very high in the boardroom. There's no question about that. But I think what they want is they want mass contribution to common goals. They want people at different parts of the enterprise to tow on the same rope. And what they're seeing at the moment is the fractured approach is really not delivering on that right now. When what they would really like is for it to significantly improve in order to be able to get maximum value out of all of this. And so what they're saying is, well, look, where are we building all this stuff, and how's it being used, and how are we aligning this to be able to achieve a specific goal, to whether that be reducing risk or some other particular strategic goal. So if you looked at a business strategy, I think if I talk to my executive clients, they're saying, well, come on, looking across our business, if we have an objective which says improve customer engagement, then what is it we're building? What BI reports, what analytical asset, what dashboards, what stories, what machine learning models are we building, and where are we using them across the business to be able to achieve that? Similarly, if I'm trying to reduce risk, what are we doing, and where is it being built, and in which tools, in order to be able to achieve that? And are we leveraging all of this to the max? And similarly, if I'm trying to optimize part of my business operations, maybe it's supply chain optimization or outbound distribution optimization, which I'm trying to make that as efficient and as low cost as possible in order to shorten the time to deliver maybe products to a customer. Again, what are we doing to help achieve that and keep that optimal? And where are we deploying these analytical assets in the business to help that achieve that goal? So overall, from a business strategy perspective, there's a whole family of reports and stories and dashboards and analytical models that need to be brought together. Some of them running in real time, some of them on demand, some of them in batch, to be able to achieve goals. And I think that's the issue that executives are frustrated about. They're not seeing that yet. It's too fractured as it stands at the moment. And what they really want is it integrated into everyday business processes to really leverage it to the max, to get most of the value out of that. And then to the people in those operational areas to be guided by those insights, whether they're recommendations or whether it's BI on reports, with natural language generation to explain the BI on the report, but just even knowing that these things exist and where they could be used around is the issue, because there's a lot of tools and a lot of different silos going on around the enterprise in order to build these, and people, because they're using different tools, completely unaware of what's going on in other parts of the business. So the focus has been very much on development, and it's kind of fractured. And really what I'm seeing from my clients at the executive level is they've kind of said to me, well, come on, we need to really, really put this to work. One exec said to me, the last decade's been about development. This decade has to be about the decade of use. We have to put it to work. And so, what is it that we need in order to make that as easy as possible, in order to make people aware, of what's out there, so that we can leverage it and get the maximum value from it to drive more effective decision making, to drive down risk, to reduce operational costs, and to seize opportunity to make more money. And for me, this is the reason why analytics catalogs are needed. We need an analytics catalog to know, well, what's out there? What are all these artifacts or these assets that people are building with all of the tools that we have out there? So we have the ability, if I create a report in Tableau, to publish it and say, here's this exists. So somebody else in some other part of the business knows that that's out there. Similarly, if I'm using a different tool, whether it's Excel or Power BI, I've got the ability to do the same. And the same goes for analytical models, because we could be using these tools against a range of different analytical systems, but we've got to know what's out there if we're going to leverage them to the max. And I suppose what we're asking for is almost like, well, could you just give me like a shop window, almost like analytics as a service, ready-made, what's out there that I can use that can really allow me to exploit that insight to the max in different parts of the enterprise. And so, a catalog is really about the ability, an analytics catalog, the ability to provide a place for that to happen, to publish these assets that are being produced so that people are aware of them, that they're organized, they're easy to find, and easy to put them to work within the enterprise in order to drive value. And it should be the case that you've got to answer a question. If you've got a business problem, well, what BI and stories and dashboards, are out there, and what analytics are out there that can help me with this problem? And it should be the case that an analytics catalog is where people naturally would want to go to find that out. And so from that point of view, ultimately, I think, we're seeing these technologies emerging now. And where are they headed? Well, they're headed into being able not just to support the ability to tell you what spreadsheets are out there and what reports and dashboards and stories and whatnot, but also what analytical models, what decision services are, what recommenders are out there that can, help guide me in different parts of the business. What actions are available to me? Are there any plans that are out there that I can make use of? Is there any decision processes that are already out there that I can leverage in order to help me, be more effective in different parts of the business? So I think we're seeing the emergence of analytics catalogs now, and I expect them to grow, to have more and more artifacts coming into this environment to make them even more valuable than they are today. But I need the ability for people to easily find stuff there, to search, to understand, have they been rated maybe by different employees around the enterprise, see who owns it, who produced it, can I ask questions about it, etc. And how do I use it? How do I put it to work within the enterprise? So, we want people to get, trusted data and shop for data. And we've been talking about that in different Big Data London webinars in the past, of data catalogs and whatnot. But it's what we deliver with all of that trusted data, which is becoming important here. I need the ability to publish newly created analytical assets into an analytics catalog, and so incrementally build up a richer and richer set of insights that can be leveraged across the enterprise to maximize value and help achieve common goals. And I think as well, the other question then is, even if I have an analytics catalog, then what? Well, I've got to be able to, integrate those analytical assets or services with our business processes in order to really maximize value. And so, if I've got different people around the enterprise making different kinds of decisions, either thousands of decisions at operations levels or even just a few decisions at strategic level, I need some way to know what assets exist that can help me make those decisions in different parts of my business, whether it be sales or finance or distribution or marketing, at different levels, and kind of which assets are in play to help me achieve that. And so if we want to share these across the enterprise, there's got to be some place where we publish them that we can be able to know that they exist and start using them. And also organize them. Can we organize them and align them with strategic business goals so that if I'm trying to reduce risk, I can see what's the family of analytical assets that are available for me to be able to do that. Similarly, if I'm trying to improve customer engagement, what's that? And so again, analytical assets in a catalog aligned with strategic objectives and put to work in different parts of the enterprise helps to achieve that that requirement, how do we get mass contribution to common goals? How do we get everybody to pull on the same rope? Without an analytics catalog, that's extremely difficult to do. So for me, this is a critical success technology component to be able to maximize value from what's being created by a lot of super smart people around the enterprise. And then therefore, but the big challenge is we have to figure out, well, where are you going to use it? Where are you going to put these assets? Which parts of our business process? So we have to be able to understand that. And we want the ability to quickly be able to then deploy those assets and let them be used in those environments to maximize that goal. So I suppose, therefore, what we're saying is understanding of business processes is kind of key in order to help maximize the use of the analytical assets. But equally, if we've got different people working with different BI tools around different data warehouses and data marts, which is kind of the, if you like, evolution of where we've come from. And similarly, a range of different tools being used around data science. If we want somewhere to bring these together and then say which combinations of these assets being produced are in play in different parts of our business operations, and where are they? And where should we deploy them? Should some of them be at the operation level? Should some of them be at the tactical level? Should some of them be at the strategic level? But as a family of assets or as a collection, that's what we want to achieve this strategic goal. And I think this is why analytics catalogs, for me, it's a new space that is really going to become seriously important over the next few years. So I kind of thought about, well, how do you wrap this up? Well, I kind of see this as we're moving analytics to the middle of the enterprise. And we want them wired into everything. We want it wired into front office, to back office, to all different parts of our operations in order to be able to maximize the business benefit that comes from the insights being produced. We want it tied in, not at operational level. We want it to happen into our business processes. We want it plugged into our business planning in order to be far more dynamic and accurate there, and ultimately turn ourselves into a far more dynamic, data-driven enterprise as a result of it. So I hope that's given you some idea, kind of to wrap up, some key technologies here, of which for me, second bullet down, analytics catalogs, absolutely critical, key technology to be able to make this vision happen in order to be able to get the most out of what we're building around the enterprise. So with that, I'll say thanks very much, and I'll hand back over to Andy.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Mike. Just a quick note before we move on to Saurbh's presentation. For anyone who's missed maybe the tiny bit at the beginning of Mike's presentation, I'd like to go over any of the slides. I know we get asked that a lot. This presentation is available on demand almost immediately after it's finished. So if you go back, you'll be able to see it on demand and rewind and pause and look at any specific bits that you want to go over again. So, but however, with that, I'd like to hand over to our second presenter for the day. Over to you, Saurbh. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Mike, firstly, thanks for recapping the many decades of work that have been going around in this space. I love what you said, right? This is the decade of usage. We've been building, but it's about time we consume it, and consume it not just in its what we've been used to, but consume it in a much more profound way. Just let's make it frictionless. So excited to be here. I would let me quickly share my screen and walk you all through the whole concept of analytics catalog and what we at ZenOptics are really trying to achieve. Mike's really encapsulated the whole thing very well. It's maximizing the value of your analytics across the enterprise. So a little bit about ZenOptics. We are a unified analytics catalog headquartered in San Jose, California, with offices in EMEA and support and R&D out of India. It's picking up momentum. It is a new space. It is a term that we coined and very well adopted and gaining traction with the Gartner community. Taking it back to the basics, everything is around the user. The user wants to make a decision. Today, when they are trying to make a decision is scattered. They need to talk to people. They need to exchange messages with peers. And ultimately, this information that they need to make that decision is spread across multiple tools. That's the reality. That's the world that we live in today. And when you have a disparate or a disconnected environment, it gives rise to more and more questions. Which tool do I look at? How do I switch between the reports? How can I trust this report? I find this asset, but there are 5 different assets which have the same name. It just becomes a convoluted environment for a business user. He or she started with trying to make a decision, but now they come up with more and more questions. And the ultimate reality is they just can't find the report in all this clutter. What do they land up doing? Requesting for another report. Even if they find something, they struggle to really make sense of it. So this is a typical environment that we are all living in. This is a consistent theme that we see in practically all our customers today. So why ZenOptics? Why did we really come into building something like this? It is what we realized is, with the democratization of data, you then had democratization of analytics. Reports which or assets which existed not just in the BI tools or the SAPs, the Tableaus, the Clicks, and the Power BIs, but they were also existing in the enterprise applications. And of course, spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are still integral to all your decision process. Now, when you have a highly motivated, data-driven organization, you add more tools. That's the answer. But just by adding tools, that's not the solution. So what we realized in conversations with a ton of customers, when you have these multiple tools, you start introducing siloed information. Information starts getting scattered in different areas. It becomes a very disconnected experience from a user community perspective. You are introducing unregulated report usage. Reports that should have been retired are still floating around. And over a period of time, it becomes a swamp of reports. And ultimately, the more and more tools you add, the more reports you add, it just becomes a complicated and expensive landscape. So we mapped all these different problem statements with our customers and came up with 4 really targeted use cases that we designed the whole product around. The first and foremost, which is practically the starting point for every conversation, it's the conversation opener, is we need a unified BI and analytics platform. We need a catalog of all our information, be it models, be it reports, be it spreadsheets. So it starts off with that. But then once you bring it all together, let's do some governance on it with the whole concept of analytics governance. Once you introduce the confidence in those assets, can we now use those assets in a pragmatic way and improve processes and take up the food chain and start tying it up to business objectives? And ultimately, at the end of the day, can we realize cost saving? Can we understand more about our existing assets and our platforms and our architecture? And can we maybe rationalize it? So these are 4 typical use cases that we really target on. What is ZenOptics? it is the single most authoritative source of all information assets. So how we do that is basically any asset, if it is being consumed through a platform, through an analytics catalog, or through a platform like ZenOptics, is a certified, approved asset ready for mass consumption. We bring out all the cross-platform information together in a single interface at an enterprise level so that there is mass adoption. Easy to find, easy to confident to use, and use across the organization. So these are the three key pillars of our success: access, assure, and accelerate. Now, just from an architecture perspective, if I was to just give the technical folks on the call of what is under the hood, the end, of course, is the business user consuming all these assets and being confident in their decision making. But under the hood, what we have is context-aware smart connectors, which connect into your traditional BI tools, your enterprise applications, which have reports like Salesforce or SAP or Hyperion, your data sets where people need to use data in making decision, or data models which might be used in these different contexts. So once you connect and bring it all together, automated, you then create the first layer, which is the access layer. Let's catalog all this information in one place. Let's catalog the metadata, and let's inherit the security. The work has already been done. The work you've put in the effort in creating security models for each of these tools. It's not a rip and replace. It's not adding another layer of security. Let's inherit that automatically. And like I said, that's the foundation. But after that, you bring in the governance. You bring in the assurance. Can we have confidence in these reports? Can we start looking at recommendations? Can we look at citizen users as what they're using? Can we build out a standardized BI glossary, which is highly automated? And the most critical piece is the acceleration. How can I make this viral adoption in my enterprise? Can we make 2% increase in the overall global adoption of analytics, which is teetering still in the low 30%? So at the end of the day, every enterprise should have one place for every user to go in to find the asset and make decision confidently. I think we owe it to them for sure. So I'll quickly take you all through a few typical use cases which cover these different, the four use cases that I mentioned earlier. The first one, which practically every company should start off with, is unification. Let's bring it all together. This is a typical supply chain. This customer came to us for a supply chain use case. They have, a traditional SAP environment. They have the Tableau, SSRS, Power BI, and the key gripe was, we have multiple BI portals for different business functions. They are floating around. We have the user experience is scattered. It's disconnected because they got to go into different applications to find the right information. And over a period of time, IT was smart. They realized that they were seeing duplication being fairly rampant in the organization. And ultimately, there was no single version of truth. So what we did is, in 6 weeks, we enabled this customer with a unified analytics platform, connected all these tools in an automated format through our smart connectors. And the ultimate beneficiaries of this was the business. They spend less time searching for reports. They have confidence in the reports that they are currently seeing. ZenOptics was able to identify redundancy of assets that were not being used. Why keep them? Why introduce risk? So a very, very typical use case where customers start off. And then the journey continues. Once you have it, then let's start putting some structure to it. A financial services organization, this was a fantastic use case. They wanted a tool to better manage and govern both their BI content and the underlying terms, the attributes, the metrics. They wanted their users to pay more attention to content than where it came from. So what ZenOptics was able to do is set and become the golden standard that says that this report is certified. Use this report confidently. It was a fairly robust adoption across the enterprise, and practically an analytics catalog has become the core of their access for all the reporting assets out there. The third one, very interesting, a merger and acquisition scenario. This is your consolidation. Over a period of time, this customer, has a traditional business object shop, has been building reports over the years. And without realizing, over the last 25 years, they've got over 70,000 reports. And they acquired and merged with a fairly large equal-sized company and inherited not just the whole reporting assets, but they also inherited duplicate reporting tools. So they had multiple versions of Oracle now to contend with. And it was a global rollout. So ZenOptics was able to simplify the whole consumption experience, take the noise out of all those 100,000 odd reports, and get it down to a manageable number. So we were able to rationalize their complete inventory before go live, give them guidance on reports that have not been used, reports that are sparingly used, reports that could be consolidated and merged. And from an IT perspective, as well as a business perspective, realize immense value there. So these are some typical use cases that we started seeing in and really starting to propagate within our customer base. Who uses ZenOptics? It's predominantly the business user. It's simple, easy to use, governed content, and people don't need to wait. If they want an asset, they go search for it. If they don't, they still find it, but and request for access. And ultimately, in the back, under the hoods, it's the IT and the management. They have one tool to manage and govern all these assets, reduce their total ownership cost, and just have a centralized control and visibility. I'd love to walk you all through a very quick demo just to give you, a picture speaks 1,000 words. So walk you through just maybe an overview of the platform. So it's a single sign-on enabled platform. You come in at the time of signing in. ZenOptics identifies or gives you the opportunity to decide how you want to come in, what kind of user you are. You come in as an expert user, which is someone like a business analyst, someone who's involved in decision-making at an intrinsic level. You come into a fairly dynamic and a rich dashboard. This is dynamically being built, and we try to simplify the whole consumption experience by giving them very targeted content that they need to look at. It could be favoriting reports. It could be, giving more information about this report. When is it, how many times it's been used? How highly is it rated? What is this report about? Who is the business owner of this report? And the most critical part, it's a certified report. What was the certification process? What is the trust level of this report? So anything that gets consumed through ZenOptics is an approved or a certified asset. You can look at, the variety of content that can come in is evident. You can look at reports or your assets in a silo, of course, but you can also start looking at it in a very organized, frictionless structure. I'll take this example of, my favorite character, Tony Stark. At an employee of, as an employee of Stark Enterprises, I want to look for content in America, right? It starts creating a whole drill down experience for you. And I'm a finance user. I have access to 18 finance reports. I have access to 6 HR reports. And this is automatically being derived by the platform because the platform understands your access, your rights, your permissions. And ultimately, I see all my disparate content, all the noise from the underlying systems has been frictionless and now available to the user in a much more curated way. The third piece, which Mike specifically called out, is tying all these assets to a business objective and then maybe to a business process. Can I take a process like a month-end close, which might be made up of assets which are floating around across the system? It might be data, it might be spreadsheets, it might be content out there, intranet or extranet content. It might be foreign exchange translators. Can I look at this content? Can I sequence it? Can I share it with my users? And then with one click, can I launch this automatically and execute it? As a user, I don't want to remember which content to see. I just need to know what is the right content I need to make this decision of. So the simplicity is what really ZenOptics tries to bring to the front. Can I search for content that I don't have access to? I am a finance user. I want to search for reports that I have access to, but I want to first time search for reports that I don't have access. Okay, fine. Let me understand more about this content. This is what I need. Why should I create another duplicate or wait for another 3 days to create that content? Can I request for access directly from here? So it's a highly integrated process as part of the whole report lifecycle management. Can I request for a new report if it exists or not? Can I start that whole process here? Can I take a term, a metadata, and identify all the assets that get impacted or get influenced by this term revenue, a BI glossary to support that. And most critical, understanding the usage of these assets. It's not just about building assets and managing assets, sharing assets, but it's about who uses these. That's through the whole, it's your BI on BI. It's understanding about all these different tools, understanding about usage, understanding what's being used, what's not being used. From a risk perspective, can I take out the risk completely from the enterprise? Can I understand who are my users? What do they use? Which are my most used reports? Which are my most used or secure assets so that I can track them better? And ultimately, can I rationalize all this and potentially save some money? Can I realign my resources? So all these encapsulated in a single analytics platform is what ZenOptics and the Analytics Catalog is all about. I've enjoyed sharing this with you. I would love to transfer it back to Andy and Mike.
Perfect. Okay, well, I've got a couple of questions for you both. First, I'll do a really quick one for you, Saurbh. Just occurred to me while I was watching it. Is there a way for users on the webinar to have a little test go with the platform? Is there trials available or anything like that? Oh, apologies. Are we still live? Are we still good?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you
hear me? Okay, yeah, cool. I'll come back to that question then. My first question then will be about governance. Let's get to it. In terms of governance, hear a lot about kind of data governance. But how important is governance to analytical assets? So why do I need analytical governance? I'll go with you, Mike, first.
Okay, I mean, no question. Analytical governance is equally important as data governance. I need to know, things like who's allowed access to what reports and dashboards. I need to know who the owners are so that I can request, a bit like Saurbh demoed. I think as well, you want to be able to trust these things, and so there's got to be a sort of like certification or governance process to be able to publish these reports, to be able to make sure that they are certified, as well as being able to, understand things like redundancy and eliminate usage, duplicate reports and stuff that is no longer used. And I think all of these things are all important, as well as of course, reports at times are only as good as the data that they're sitting on top of, to some extent. We all heard the expression "garbage in, garbage out." So I think the governance process, if you like, end to end here, is not just an analytics governance thing; it's a data governance and an analytics governance thing. And I think both are needed in order to be able to sort of maximize the value out of what we see in an analytics catalog.
And I'll put the question to you as well, Saurbh. How are you finding it when you're introducing the concept of analytics catalog to customers, potential customers? What's the hooks that's getting them really kind of interested? What's the problems you're solving first, kind of thing?
Andy, the most common theme that we are consistently seeing is the whole unification platform. There is overload of content. There is confusion in every enterprise, and that's where we start seeing customers come in. And then once they realize the value of unification and the automation that goes into it, very early on, they start getting the art of possible. They understand the value of governance on top. Just continuing on to Mike's point, data governance is governance in totality, I think, is incomplete without the analytics governance. Data governance and analytics governance have to converge. And that's where a tight integration between the two technologies is critical to see the end-to-end result. Because at the end of the day, when a user is consuming an asset, they're not going into a data warehouse to consume the asset, to consume that data. They look at it from a report. So it's very important that the whole analytics governance sits up front for every enterprise.
Oh. Looks like we lost Andy there. So yeah, maybe I'll try and take over from Andy while he gets back in again. So obviously you showed a lot there, Saurbh, in terms of the kind of capability. You talked about glossaries. I mean, obviously we hear a lot about glossaries in the data governance space, but how do you see glossaries being used in the context of an analytics catalog?
Great question. So the way we build these glossaries automated, it is a data steward function. They approve the metadata, very similar to a data glossary that is existing as part of data catalogs. But tying the metadata all the way to the report, to the user, is what we focus on. The impact analysis, looking at the cross-functional assets that tie a particular KPI and the person to the KPI. That's what a ZenOptics BI glossary is. It actually came out of customers asking for it and just understanding more and more about this new space where they came in and we built it.
Mm-hmm. Just looking down the list of questions that have come in here. Question that says, you talked about getting more people to use data and analytics. So how can the analytics catalog increase adoption and grow that data culture?
Collaboration,
Yeah.
right? It's imperative. ZenOptics or the space isn't trying to become another BI tool. It's about maximizing your existing investments. It's about understanding who uses what. It's understanding how many people have access to a report versus how many are actually using them. Is it because the people not using, are they not aware of it? Are they not do they think that the report is not appropriate or it doesn't answer their questions. So ZenOptics aims to bring all these questions to the forefront. It gives you the insight to ask the right questions to really improve adoption, to go to the user. And this is the analyst going to the users and really questioning and pushing them and challenging them. Why would you not want to use when you have something so easy to use and find?
Okay. I mean, certainly for me, no question about it. In my mind, I think this whole collaboration thing's like super exciting because, from what I can see, if you can understand who's using what report, then you can almost start to say, well, why can't I just follow these people, right? And then you get this almost like social network just breaks out around all of these assets, and then you can even take that beyond. Well, if I can understand who's using what, you can then start to understand usage behaviors and even get into the whole predictive element around that, recommending reports and analytical assets and those kinds of things to people in order for them to maximize the value out of what's in here. Because as you say, there could be hundreds of thousands of reports and in there. Is that fair?
Totally. I trust Mike, right? I trust Mike's citizen user in my company. So I would, traditionally, I would just follow what Mike uses. So the social aspect of analytics, it's very important. We come from the Valley. I'm surrounded by the Netflix, the Amazon, and the Yelp and the Googles of the world. Bringing all these social concepts into the world of analytics. That's what, when we started this journey, that was our whole intent.
Cool. I mean, that I think that helps a lot because it also gives people confidence around using analytical assets if they've got the ability to, ask questions and collaborate with others around them. And I think also that helps in ratings as well, because I guess you're going to get, the more valuable ones will kind of get more highly rated, and I guess the less valuable ones will start to sink to the bottom, and then you get this kind of clear out of these not so valuable analytical assets, and then hopefully the business kind of starts to fuel itself by able to get more and more focus around specific really high value assets.
Exactly.
Andy, good to see you back on again.
Yeah, you might notice a slight change of angle. I had to bring up a backup laptop. Unfortunately, my laptop's had a moment. It's very hot in the UK, so must have just melted or something. So yes, apologies for that.
Okay.
In terms of in terms of the question and the title that we came to initially, in terms of being data driven and analytics catalogs helping with being data driven, I'm going to just use this as a sort of last question now. How's it driving business adoption and making people? How has it helped to make companies data driven, as per the sort of title?
Well, let me take it initially. I think for me, there's no question. I mean, I don't think I've ever been in an era where analytics have been so highly valued in the boardroom. I mean, it's front and center almost in every boardroom these days, and so there's real eagerness at executive level to leverage analytical assets to the max, and I think that for me it's the future of analytics catalogs as much as the present. I mean, you think about what else can go in here going forward. All the other, there's a whole bunch of machine learning capabilities going in there. If you take a look at what Saurbh showed with the business processes, being able to leverage, you don't have to know which tool it is that's got these. You just need to use these analytical assets at specific points in business processes to guide decisions, and you can lead people through that. I mean, that just makes it so painless. It's the focus is on the insights rather than the well, which report was that, which tool was that, and all of these barriers in the ways of users. Now, if you take additional analytical assets as we bring more and more of these together, including predictive and prescriptive models where you can get recommenders, and you start to be able to say, well, what recommenders and where would I use those in my process? So I got BI, I've got predictions, I've got recommendations. You mix all and match all of those into processes, and now you really get, kind of, if you like, analytically infused processes everywhere around the enterprise. And so for me, I mean, what a way to put analytics to work. It's integrated into everybody's day job, and they're guided through the process in order to maximize the value of it and make better decisions. I mean, and in some cases, obviously, we may even be able at specific points in the process just to automate decisions because of the back of insights. We're able to do that, and so leverage the cost benefits that would come out of that through greater and greater automation to help companies become more efficient on the back of guided decision making. So I mean, to me, I think what Saurbh showed there to me is right at the beginning of this curve. This thing's just going to go. I mean, and hanging on to his tail is going to be the challenge.
Yeah, and I'll give you the final word. So, in terms of how's this kind of democratizing people, increasing the the usage and stuff, and how are people going to drive this sort of data-driven organization?
But I think as well the point that Saurbh made about removing getting rid of untrusted stuff is very much important. With companies, let's face it, data warehousing is probably best part of 30 years old. For a lot of my clients, they're in 4th generation, 5th generation data warehousing. They've built up thousands and thousands of these reports all over the enterprise, and they're kind of buried in it. They can't see, use an expression we have here in the UK, they can't see wood for trees. I mean, because there's so much of it, and so I think being able to, sort that out, organize it, get rid of the redundancy and the lower value ones, allows social rating and everything else that goes on to it. What we end up doing is effectively, almost creating a well-oiled machine, that's driven by this.
Perfect. And I'll give you the final word, Saurbh, before we say goodbye. I know we've gone a tiny weeny bit over. Mostly my fault for having a computer that melted. I'll give you the final word in terms of how you feel this is really increasing the sort of data-driven organization.
It's Andy, Mike, this was it was a pleasure to be here. The ultimate goal is to increase adoption. It's to make the life of the business user simple. I couldn't capture it in any simpler, better terms that Mike just explained, but we're just on the cusp of something big, right? The adoption of a technology like this, there is pent-up demand. So companies have tried to build BI portals, have maintenance-heavy people assigned to it, but those days are in the past. We have the technology out there. We have a platform out there in the form of an analytics catalog, which calls for an enterprise to empower their business users, bring in all that is good in technology today to the benefit of the business user. That's what our internal motto is. That's what we really strive for in every implementation of ours. It is, we're excited. We're really excited about expanding this all over worldwide.
Perfect. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you both on the show today. And looking forward to hearing a lot more about ZenOptics in the future as well. Nice to see you as always, Mike. And with that, I'd like to bid farewell for another Big Data London webinar, and we'll see you very soon. Thanks, guys. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.